Chapter 16. A Vision of Hell. Friday afternoon, the 1st of September, 1939. Mum disappeared off to the kitchen, and Tilly made her escape before she was marched back into the garden for some more horrid digging. Her leg was still red from the slap, and in quite a fury she grabbed her bike and went out to the gate, swinging it shut with a loud bang. The streets were very busy for early afternoon. As she rode along, she had to pull up her brakes several times to avoid people crossing in front of her, and all along the pavements people were walking rapidly, heads pressed forward as if they had an urgent appointment at the doctor. They were all carrying baskets or pulling dogs along on leads or holding bird cages to their chests. Everyone has a pet with them, she thought. Where on earth are they going? Maybe they're evacuating their pets. Just then she heard a crocodile of children from Townfield Elementary School snaking towards the railway station. Every child carried a knapsack over their shoulders and had brown labels round their necks. Cycling up to the line, Tilly could see names on the labels. The start of the evacuation, she thought. Where are they sending you to? Tilly asked a tall girl. Wish they'd tell us, said the girl, shifting her knapsack to the other shoulder. We're off to the country, that's all I know. Hope they have ponies. Then she was gone, and as Tilly waited for the line to cross the road in front of her, she saw a woman with a puppy in her arms and a small boy gripping her leg and wailing. No, Timmy, the woman was saying. You know what Daddy said. Fido will bark and bite people when the bombs fall, and he can't come into the shelter. There's no room. Fido, 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 screamed the little boy over and over again. People hurried on past her, clutching baskets, and Tilly followed. A long queue was building up on the street. What's going on? She asked a boy, older than her, with a rabbit in his arms. We're waiting for the vet to put the animals down. It's kinder. The war will start any minute now. Germany's invaded Poland, said the boy. I'll be off to the army soon anyway. They'll call up all the men and I'm already 17. He looked at Tilly as though he couldn't wait. She rode to the end of the line where she could see the door wide open, the waiting room full of people with their pets waiting quietly for death. It made her shudder, and she pedalled away and round the next corner. There was a high fence, but in the middle was a gate which was open. Curiously, she went over and looked through the gate. It was like a vision of hell. Piles and piles of dogs, cats, birds and other animals were thrown together in the yard behind the vet's house, waiting for, well, she had no idea what, but it didn't matter whether they were going on to the bonfires by the canal or somewhere else. They were all absolutely, completely dead. All those poor unwanted animals, she thought, as tears welled up in her eyes. Dear little pets belonging to children like me and Rosie. The grown-ups didn't love them enough to look after them and feed them in the war. Shocking, if you ask me, came a voice in her ear, and she whirled round to see an old man leaning on a stick. What will they do with them all? Asked Tilly. Turn them into glue. Need a lot of glue in the war. Someone's going to get rich, said the old man, and he walked away, limping on one leg. How dreadful, thought Tilly. She turned her bike and rode off, almost blinded by tears, until she reached the fields. Pulling up on her brakes, she stood for a moment, feeling the warm sunshine on her back. Swallows swooped above her head and foxgloves nodded along the hedgerow, where blackberries were already ripe. A grey field mouse popped its head up to stare for a second, and then, quick as a flash, disappeared into the yellow corn, which was undulating like a sea all the way to the horizon. Thank goodness the emergency zoo is safe, she told herself, at least for now, and she rode on to into the clearing. The others had already arrived, and the little girls were playing with their pets on the grass. They were right in the middle of a clapping song she and Rosie used to do when they were little. Tilly stopped for a moment and watched them. Bat, bat, come under my hat, and I'll give you a slice of bacon, and when I bake I'll give you a cake, if I'm not mistaken. Then she felt a cold hand in her palm. Turning, she saw Rosie's chalk white face, those points of red flaming away like a furnace. Only a few more days until you're evacuated. I told Dad I promised that we'll stay together, and he must speak to Megan about you coming too, Tilly said, her chin stuck in the air defiantly. I bet your Mum and Dad didn't like that. Did they shout at you? Said Rosie, her green eyes flashing. Mum slapped my leg. She showed Rosie the red patch, which was beginning to fade. Oh, Tilly, Rosie breathed. You withstood torture for me? It was nothing, said Tilly, but she had to admit she had been very shocked. Her mother hardly ever smacked her. They went into the hut and Tilly called out, Hi, my darling Bonnie, she said. her dog free, and Bonnie immediately started to jump up. Tilly bent over her, pulling gently on her curly ears, enjoying the feeling of the dog's rough, warm tongue licking her face. Rosie was about to say something when a high-pitched scream came through the open door of the hut. The girls raced outside to see Horace charging across the clearing, head down, horns ready to tear into anyone near enough. "He's going to gore the girls to death," thought Tilly in horror. "Run!" she yelled, but they huddled terrified in the grass, clutching their pets, and screamed. Miles fired an arrow which hit Horace's thick, hairy back, and he let out a whoop, but it just bounced off. Then Sidney jumped onto Horace's path, yelling, "Here, boy!" He had a bit of rope in his hand and started to whistle in a shrill tone. "He's not a sheep," yelled Tilly. "Get out of the way, Sid!" She picked up a stone and threw it hard. It hit Horace on the tip of his nose, and for a second the old goat halted, pawing the ground and waving his horns about. Then he lowered his head in the final charge. Tilly was about to hurl another stone when Sophia burst through the clearing, screaming out, "Horace! Stop right now!" Horace stumbled to a halt, his horns inched from Sidney's bony legs. When the wily old goat started a hoarse bleating. "You silly Billy," muttered Sophia, grabbing the end of the rope which Horace had chewed through. Turning to the children, she said, "I'm so sorry. Please forgive us. I'll make sure he never escapes again. Please, Tilly, don't send us away." "Your stupid goat nearly killed my sister," called out Neville. "Well, the girls seem fine now," said Tilly. Mary and Pam had settled back into in the grass and were cooling and calming down the rabbits and the little pets. No one seemed any the worse for their latest adventure. "Don't worry," said Tilly, feeling sorry for the older girl. "Just make sure it doesn't happen again." Miles came over with a coiled-up piece of rope. "Found it on the dump at the back of the hut. If we double it up, it might stop him chewing through it." Sophia, still struggling with Horace, who was trying to pull away from her, nodded breathlessly, and Miles set to work. Tilly looked round for Rosie, but there was no sign. She was about to walk around to Tinkerbell's grave when the SOS sounded on the bugle. Rudy burst into the clearing, his face plastered with sweat, panting hard. He pointed back towards the fields and cried out in a mixture of German and English, "Connor, come on, looking, Jamitz, Boxer Hound, and Bad Boy." "What's he saying about Connor?" said Tilly in alarm. "It sounds as though Connor's coming back, and that creep Bill," murmured Rosie, who had wandered over so silently till he hadn't even heard her. Miles slotted an arrow in his bow. Feet wide apart, he took up his position on guard. Boxer broke through the thicket, tugging Connor behind him on the end of the chain, but there was no sign of Bill. The dog came to a halt inches from Tilly's feet. She stood her ground, hands on her hips, as furious look as she could muster on her face, even though her knees were shaking. Connor tugged on the lead and muttered, "Sit, Boxer, sit, boy." When Connor raised his head, Tilly let out a gasp. His face was streaked with tears. She couldn't believe it. "You've got to help me, Tilly," Connor said. "It's me dad. He says he's going to shoot Boxer in the morning with his army pistol. I've had Boxer since he was born. He's always stood by me, growls at Dad when he goes to hit me. Dad always backs off. He's all I got in the world since me mum died. Please, Tilly, hide him for me."